what's been getting the internet and social media abuzz in Media Watch. And for that, we're joined on set by Haxi Myers-Belkin. And Haxi, you're starting with online reaction to news that President Trump has urged his Mexican counterpart to stop publicly saying that Mexico wouldn't pay for Trump's famous border wall. That's all in the Washington Post.
Yes, the Washington Post has obtained a transcript of the first conversation Trump ever had with Enrique Pena Nieto, and it reveals that in private, Trump admitted that he'd have to find other ways to fund his famous border wall, a wall which, of course, he'd repeatedly insisted would be paid by Mexico. It also reveals how Trump urged his Mexican counterpart to stop refuting Trump's funding claims in public, threatening to break off communication if he refused. Cue, unsurprisingly, some Twitter outrage and hilarity. One Twitter user who self-identifies as a left-leaning soldier described the revelation that Trump described the wall as the least important thing, but politically the most important thing, as proof, quite simply, that Trump thinks his supporters are gullible sheep, more concerned with what he says than what he does. CNN's Jackie Schnecher, meanwhile, tweeting that the leaked transcripts show Trump's legendary negotiating skill is a sophisticated combination of begging, pouting, and throwing tantrums. And I think we should read that with more than a little sardonic tone.
And next, Haxi, we have more on the fallout from what critics are calling Sunday's sham election for that Constituent Assembly in Venezuela.
Yeah, so let's begin briefly with last night's news. Venezuelan authorities saying that 8 million people turned out to vote for the country's new Constituent Assembly. But if you take a look at this tweet by the Wall Street Journal's South America bureau chief, you see that Smartmatic, now that's the company that provided the polling booths, says that the results were tampered with, and they're unequivocal about that. So as for Maduro's response, Maduro, of course, the Venezuelan president, he says that Smartmatic was quite simply pressured to the neck by gringos in an effort to smear his government. Now, it's worth saying, Tom, there's absolutely no evidence to support that. Now, Western leaders have been condemning the leadership of President Nicolas Maduro for weeks now, and Maduro's latest claims have only emboldened them. Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan has tweeted that the President of the United States is right to sanction the Maduro regime in Venezuela, and I join his call for the immediate release of detained opposition leaders. And that in the US has been pretty much what we've been hearing. It hasn't been a particularly controversial response, but that isn't the case everywhere. The situation in Venezuela is forcing a lot of left-wing institutions around the world to effectively pick sides, and some, unsurprisingly, are siding with Maduro. News.com, that's an Australian news website, is reporting on recent meetings of two of Australia's largest unions. We read that both the Construction, Forestry, Mining and Energy Union and the Maritime Union of Australia have pledged their support with the people of Venezuela, and this is the important bit, with their revolutionary socialist government. The unions denouncing what they call the intervention of the US and other capitalist powers. Now, if we move on to the UK, Jeremy Corbyn, who's the far-left leader of the Labour opposition, has been getting into hot water over what his critics are calling his deafening silence on the issue. Meanwhile, the shadow Home Office minister has also been facing criticism for condemning America's involvement in Latin America rather than focusing on the Venezuelan regime's litany of abuses. And this article in The Times reminds us that over 105 people have so far been killed during the course of violent protests in the country in recent months.
Another story, doing the rounds on social media is, of course, that record-breaking transfer from Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain of the Brazilian striker Neymar.
Absolutely. So this is, of course, great news for Paris Saint-Germain, but they weren't the only ones keen to get their hands on the Brazilian striker. During a meeting with Paris Saint-Germain's president, the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, said that Neymar's transfer was une bonne nouvelle pour la France. Great news for France. So the president is pleased, but so too is his budget minister, Gérald Darmanin.
No, I think I know why.
Yes, and why do you reckon that is? Basically, it's because he'd much rather Neymar pay his taxes in France than anywhere else. And you can't really blame him, can you? That said, not everyone in the French Parliament is so happy. Alexis Corbière, he's a far-left MP. He has said that this whole Neymar transfer, it's just proof of mad money, football as business. The game's gone crazy for what he calls Neymar-chandise. It's a bit of a pun that doesn't work quite so well in English. But he says it's all propped up with oil money from Qatar. A reference, of course, to the fact that Paris Saint-Germain is owned by Qatar.
Haxi Myers-Belkin with Media Watch. That's sadly all we have time for. Thank you very much. Taking a very quick break now, but don't go anywhere. There's more world news and headlines coming up in just a few moments' time. Do stay with us if you can here on France 24.